The film opens with a scene in a high school in Virginia where Sherry greets Marin on an annual basis. Marin declines her invitation to join her for a stay at her house and mentions her father. Sherry suggests Marin slip out because she won't let it happen. Marin resides with Frank, who is her spiritual guardian. Marin sneaks out as soon as he falls asleep and goes to Sherry's house, where she encounters her and two other girls named Kim and Jackie. Kim asks Marin about her mother, but Marin is silent. Kim's nails are painted with fragrant varnish by Sherry when Marin suddenly grabs Kim's hand and violently bites her finger, severely injuring it. Marin runs from the area. She runs to her home and bangs on the door as the other girls begin to scream. Frank sees Marin with Kim's blood on her face as he approaches the door. He gives her 3 minutes to collect her things after realizing the urgency of the situation before they must leave the location forever. Frank abandons Marin in her sleep after moving to Maryland. He leaves a tape recording behind that reveals Marin has tried to eat human flesh before, and he is no longer able to defend her. He talks about specific incidents in the recording, like the time Marin was 3 and the babysitter died, forcing him to hide the body. Similar to this, while attending a summer camp, 8-year-old Marin dismembered a boy's corpse. In order to find her real mother, Janelle McArns, Marin plans to travel to Ohio. She crosses paths with a guy by the name of Sully while traveling. Since he is also a cannibal or eater, he tells her that he can smell her and figures that she can as well. He directs Marin to a house where a frail elderly woman has fallen and has been helpless all day, which Sully noticed indicates that she is close to passing away. Sully insists they must sate their craving for flesh in defiance of Marin's disgust. The elderly lady passes away the following morning, and Sully devours her right away. Marin accepts his invitation to take part. Sully exhibits a long rope made of human hair that has been consumed or killed by him. Marin escapes and gets on a bus while Sully is in the shower, but Sully sees her as she gets on the bus. Marin enters a store in a different state and makes an attempt to steal some goods. She and Lee, a young man, step in when they see a mother being bullied by a man. The man runs after Lee outside after Lee confronts and provokes him. Lee reappears as Marin approaches an abandoned building nearby, his face and neck covered in blood, revealing that he is also a cannibal. Lee and Marin start talking, acknowledging that they have the same condition, and Lee invites Marin to go with him. Lee brings Marin to stay the night at the man's house as he robs him of his car. They travel to Lee's former home the following day to see his sister Kayla. Lee is reprimanded by Kayla for leaving and breaking his promise to stay. Lee consents to help Marin find her birth mother. They grow romantic feelings for one another along the way. They come across Jake and Brad as they take a break. Jake is a Kennedy as well. Jake explains to Marin and Lee how eating a person's bones and all causes a cannibal to feel more intense emotions than simply eating the flesh, though Brad is unconcerned. Prior to attempting to steal Jake's strike, Marin and Lee wait for the men to go to sleep. Despite Jake noticing them, they manage to get away without being caught. Marin and Lee stop at a fair, where they enjoy a passionate kiss and a ride on the Ferris wheel. Later, when Marin expresses a desire for food, Lee leaves to look for potential prey. He runs into a booth owner who refuses to give a kid a prize because they made an improper throw. The operator becomes flirtatious and agrees to meet up with Lee later after Lee gives it a try and impresses her. Lee leads the booth operator into a cornfield where they have a passionate encounter as Marin waits nearby. When the booth operator's performance reaches its peak, Lee mercilessly ends his life. After the deed, Lee invites Marin to share a meal made from the booth operator's remains. However, when Marin learns that the booth operator had a spouse and children living in a nearby residence, she is horrified by their deeds and quickly leaves Lee's company. Marin is traveling alone when she comes across Barbara, her grandmother. Barbara hesitates at first, but eventually agrees to Marin's request to come inside and ask about Janelle. Barbara explains to Marin that Janelle is no longer with them, but rather is residing in a mental hospital rather than necessarily being dead. Marin also promises to never see Barbara again, which Barbara finds to be a kind gesture. Marin meets up with Sully, who had been pursuing her, as she leaves. Marin declines Sully's request to work together once more, which causes Sully to call her a derogatory term. Finally, Marin makes it to the hospital where Janelle is being held. When Marin first sees Janelle, she notices that she has severely damaged her hands and is hardly able to speak. A letter that Janelle wrote many years ago with Marin in mind is given to her by the nurse. In the letter, Janelle describes her time as a cannibal and expresses worry that Marin might not feel secure around her. After Marin has finished reading the letter, Janelle makes an attempt to attack and devour her, but the nurse stops her, causing Marin to flee the area. Kayla and her friends are met by Marin. When she stops to talk to Kayla about Lee at a later stage in her journey, Kayla reveals that they once lived with their father, who mysteriously disappeared. Kayla acknowledges being angry with Lee for abandoning her. Later, Marin visits Lee again and asks him about his father. Lee reveals that his father mistreated him and Kayla, which led to his eventual consumption of his father. The two make the decision to get back together and try to live a normal life together. After several months of peaceful existence, Marin and Lee's tranquility is disturbed when Sully finds them. Marin is physically beaten by Sully and threatened with a knife in an effort to force her to go with him. However, Lee steps in and uses a plastic bag to suffocate Sully. Lee is stabbed in the chest to death by Sully during the altercation. Marin, in spite of this, snatches the knife from Sully and stabs him. After that, they drag his lifeless body to the bathtub where Marin begins to eat one of his organs, which Sully manages to withstand right up until the very end. Lee finds that the attack by Sully, which resulted in a punctured lung, has caused him to experience significant bleeding. A blonde hair strand that Marin finds inside a hair rope that belonged to Sully suggests that Sully killed Kayla and used the hair to find Marin. Marin tries to help Lee stand up so they can get medical attention, but they both understand that doing so would require disclosing their condition if they went to a hospital for help. Lee therefore exhorts Marin to eat his flesh. Lee is still alive, but Marin still complies with his request. Marin and Lee are seen giving each other a tender embrace in the final scene while perched on a rock. The movie ends with the credits rolling after this scene, which occurs earlier in their narrative. If you enjoy watching movies, then my channel is the place for you. As a fervent movie fan, I produce content that is intended to inform and amuse you while giving you insightful commentary on the movies you love. So make sure to click the subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the most recent movie news and analysis. You won't be sorry. I appreciate your help.